Hello, my name is Nico Bosetti, and I'm going to present some key data from our latest London Intelligence publication, tracking the impact of the pandemic on London. I'm going to start with data on COVID-19. London was hit earlier and harder by the virus compared to the rest of the country at least. In this first phase of the pandemic, running to the 17th of April, London had the highest age standardized mortality rate of any UK major city. This is partly because London saw earlier infections, leaving therefore time for the virus to spread widely before the national lockdown was imposed. However, since mid-April, infections and deaths have been growing more slowly in London than they have in many other cities and regions. Looking within London now, boroughs with high level of deprivations have also been experiencing the highest mortality rates from COVID-19. There are some notable differences between the distribution of cases of COVID-19, which you can see on the left-hand side, and the distribution of deaths, which you can see on the right-hand side. For example, Kingston upon Thames had more recorded cases per 100,000 people than Hackney or Tower Hamlets did, but the age standardized mortality rate is 3.5 times lower in Kingston than it is in Hackney. Some of this difference could be due to the number of tests that were conducted, but there's also a direct link between the level of deprivation in an area and mortality from COVID-19, as we now know from recent analysis by the Office for National Statistics, which found that the age standardized mortality rate from COVID-19 was twice as high in the 20% most deprived areas in England than it was in the 20% least deprived areas in England. And it seems that this correlation is reflected within London. So COVID-19 is not only highlighting the capital's health inequalities, it also seems to have worsened them so far. This means that there will need to be clear public health efforts that should be targeted towards places with high levels of deprivation. Now let's look at some of the most striking statistics of life under lockdown in the capital. Data on Google Maps users illustrate how lockdown and physical distancing measures are affecting the movements of Londoners. Since lockdown began on the 23rd of March, trips to workplaces are 70% lower than normal, while trips to shops outside basic services or restaurants and museums are down by about 80%. Tube and rail use is also down by 80%. And trips to grocery stores and pharmacies have also fallen below normal. But this is after a stockpiling spike in mid-March, which you can see in the yellow line on the chart. Londoners have also initially reduced their use of the city's parks, but have returned to them in greater numbers after several weeks of lockdown. How does this compare to other cities? Well, London's lockdown seems to have been so far very thorough by international standards. London has seen deep falls in activity, here as shown as visits to retail and recreation places, compared to other global cities such as Berlin, New York, Stockholm, or Tokyo. South Korea, in particular, has maintained higher levels of retail and leisure activity, though this is after earlier reductions, as you can see on the chart. This might be thanks to what's been reported as an effective implementation of contact tracing there. As new research found, London also has seen a greater fall in activity than other places in the UK. Part of the reason behind this may be that Londoners are more able to work from home on average. We know from statistics before the pandemic hit that 35% of Londoners said that they've ever worked from home before the pandemic, in comparison to 22% of people in the West Midlands, for example. The crisis has hit some sectors much harder than others. This is according to a voluntary business survey that was run by the Office for National Statistics in early April. So that found that 1 in 4 businesses nationally had stopped trading then. Hospitality and catering and the arts and entertainment sectors have been the most affected. They are operating at under 20%, as you can see in this table. On the other hand, public and professional services have been operating nearer full capacity at about 90-95%. Now, we know London's economy is dominated by professional services, and that means that London will have some degree of resilience compared to other parts of the country. But slowdowns in retail, accommodation, and food will have long-term consequences for some of London's lowest paid workers, which tend to be concentrated in these sectors. By some measures, London looks slightly less affected than other places already. One indicator that monitors businesses' early response to the fall in activity is recruitment. The market-leading job search tool Indeed compares the number of job postings on its website with previous years and found that between the 1st February and 24th of April, job postings in London were down by nearly half compared to previous years. Compared to other regions, London seems slightly less affected at this point in the crisis. But one sector that does illustrate the pains of lockdown and its implications is air travel, which has been at a near standstill because of global travel restrictions. This has been hugely important to London's economy, with London being the 5th most visited city in the world before the pandemic hit, and the airport economy being a major employer, the main employer in West London, for instance. Given the challenges of maintaining physical distances aboard commercial planes, experts think air travel is likely to be disrupted for some time, and this will have big implications for London's economy. Let's finish by looking at how Londoners have been moving around the city under lockdown. This chart is based on Apple Maps mobility data, which shows the number of user journeys planned by mode of travel. This is until the beginning of May, and for that period, the data suggests that whilst people have been reducing movements across all modes, driving was down by about 65% compared to 90% decline for public transport journeys. Now, with intense pressure on the capital's roads and streets before the pandemic already, it will be crucial to ensure that driving isn't the only way to achieve social distancing. Finally, those of us after some good news in the downturn can look to improvements in air pollution. In roadside locations like Oxford Street on this chart, you can see the effect of lower car traffic on some pollutants like oxides of nitrogen or nitrogen dioxide. Of course, not all pollutants are affected, but it seems like on balance, we have been breathing cleaner air. We will be updating this data quarterly from now and adding new data as it comes in. Do let us have any comments. Thank you for listening.